everyone. Welcome to the Actuarial Women's Podcast. We started this as an opportunity to sit with women and eventually men who have done amazing things in their career. An opportunity to sit side by side with amazing women, get a feel for their careers, their lives, and an opportunity for you to be able to play it back, watch it, and get inspired. It was us turning from our events where we only reach a certain number of people to be able to have a wider reach. You can pause, come back, take a break, and continue to get inspired anytime you're feeling like maybe this journey isn't for you or maybe it isn't possible. The plan is that this first series is women CEOs, past and present, women who have gotten to the top of the ladder. And I think for me, as someone in that middle stage of my career, I think this part of the series for me was really like that, okay, it is possible part of the series. And I think for me, that is what I wanted to achieve as this first part of the series. And today, I am incredibly honored to have a woman who has supported us through and through. Through the AWC, she has always supported us, always been a speaker for our LDP events, come to our events. And that is why in 2025, she was our Inkanyezi Award winner, which really goes to a woman who has provided mentorship, built careers, and really passed the ladder down. But Anne has had an amazing career, starting out as a consultant, making her way over to industry at some point, all the way to the top at Sanlam Sky, then making your way over to a bank assurer in Standard Bank and Liberty and holding really senior positions there. I mean, Anne, words are hard to find. And anyone I told that I'm interviewing Anne was like, one, people said, say hello, so you're clearly widely known. And outside of that, I think everyone was like, what a great person to have as your first guest. I think you're well known everywhere. I think you've succeeded so well as mentored so well that so many people are so excited to hear your story, get to know you. So thank you, Anne, for having us as she's our very, very first guest.
And thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor. I'm really pleased to be here.
Oh, so thanks, Anne. And I think for me, first things first, usually as part of when people want to find out about this degree and the how, I think I didn't put it to you in the questions, but actually, why did you decide that you wanted to be an actuary?
Yeah, so I think I've got a story that's like a lot of other actuaries out there, which is that I almost fell into it by accident. So I was good at maths. And when you're good at maths, everybody tells you that the career you need to be is an actuary. So when I was in high school, one of my dad's friends actually said to me, hey, have you heard of this thing called Actuarial? If you're so good at maths, you should do it. I didn't know anything about it. I certainly didn't know anyone who was an actuary. So I put it on my list of options. And I still remember standing there at WIT's registration I had a CA application form, a actuarial one, and then a sort of general BCom. I'd been accepted for all three, and I had to stand at registration and pick one. And I'll be honest, it felt a little bit like going eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I had a lot of friends doing CA and a lot of friends doing actuarial, and I just sort of picked one. So not really something I fell into on purpose.
So that's true. That's definitely true of most people. So you get through this degree at WITS. Why consulting?
So I wasn't mad about university. I had lots of fun at university, but I didn't really love the academic side of it. And I was quite keen to start working as quickly as possible. I also was quite keen on earning some money. So I decided not to do honours. In that era, it was a little bit more acceptable not to do honours because you couldn't get any exemptions doing honours. Okay. So you were almost doing it just for the love of the academics rather than because there was a good reason to do it. And WITS used to send our CVs out to potential future employers. One of the offers that I got was from a small little actuarial consulting firm called Southern Africa Actuarial Consultants. And the reason I took the job was really just the person who hired me. I just had a really good feeling about him. His name was Giles Waugh. He's retired now, but very well known in the industry. And I just had a good feeling about him, and I felt like this was the kind of small family environment that I would like to work in. So I wouldn't say I specifically chose consulting. I looked. It was about the feeling that I got at the place rather than the role itself.
Okay. So then you did that for a few years. You eventually transitioned to go into industry. What motivated that?
Yeah, so I got a huge amount of value from my time in consulting, and I think it's a really good place to start your career. And there were really kind of three main big things that I got out of my time in consulting. So first of all was an extremely strong technical grounding. SAAC eventually got bought by Deloitte, and I think Deloitte is still, up there with the most technically strong consulting firms in South Africa. We did extremely good technical work. There were fabulous people to learn from. So the technical grounding was incredible. But then I also got a lot of exposure. So what's nice about consulting is you meet lots of clients. You have a client-facing responsibility. So, you have to use some EQ. You have to develop some people skills, etc. So that it gave me a lot of exposure to people in the industry and also some non-technical skills, which were really useful. And then the most important thing that happened to me at Deloitte or with SAC was that I met the love of my life. And we were both working in the life team and both very much enjoying it. But things were getting more and more serious. So one of us needed to move on. And I'd been there for 7 years. And at the time, I had a big client who was, it was one of the smaller listed insurance companies, but they were a very big client for me. And I had very strong relationships there. And they got bought by Sanlam. And I'd been resisting their advances for a number of years. But when they got bought by Sanlam, they were all of a sudden part of something quite a bit bigger. And just almost by luck, Giles one day couldn't attend a board meeting, and I attended on his behalf, and I was very nervous. I'd never done something like that before. I had to present the valuation report. And I got a phone call from the PA of the sort of head of the division in Sanlam that looked after that business sort of a day later, and he asked if I would go for dinner with him, which was a bit weird. And I went for dinner, and he was looking for an actuary to sit on his exco to help him look after the portfolio of companies that Sanlam had pulled together. And it was just really right place, right time. It was an organization I knew well and that I had good relationships in, but also at a time where I was starting to think maybe it was time for one of us to move on. And then it was an exciting time for Sanlam because they just made all these acquisitions and they were trying to turn it into something real. So, it worked out quite well.
Okay, so I guess for you, like you're saying, right time, right place, right opportunity lands. And I think that's true. I think for a lot of actuarial people, almost sometimes always say your career kind of goes with the flow and opportunities kind of come as they come. Yeah. But I mean, that was a jump, right? So you were this consultant and now you're off into this exco role. Yeah. How did you make the transition?
Yeah, so it was a little bit fluid for me. So, and a lot of my career has been like that. So although I've made big role changes, I've also made a lot of things have changed in my roles over the years. So my roles have grown and developed. So when I joined, I was the exco member for Actuarial. So I had a small actuarial team, and then we had all the actuarial teams in all the subsidiary companies. And it was still a little bit more of the same. So there were still valuations, there was reporting, there was managing actuaries. So it wasn't such a big leap. But there was now this additional exco responsibility and exposure to that and starting to understand a little bit more about the real world and how a real business gets run, seeing a bit the nuts and bolts of that. So that transition happened. That transition wasn't too much of a shock. And then quite soon after I took on that role, they expanded it to include risk management. And then I was appointed as the CFO for the cluster. So I took on finance as well. And that was a little bit more of a shock because now all of a sudden you're managing non-actuaries. And there's a big difference between leading a team of actuaries and leading a team of non-actuaries. That took a lot of getting used to. And then also being a CFO comes with a whole lot of different responsibilities and things that were very new to me. I had great support though. So the Exco team that I was part of, I had great support. And I also had an incredible executive coach who's now a very good friend and I'm still in touch with. She's still coaching into her 70s. She's incredible. I had a lot of support from them as well. So it wasn't as much of a shock as maybe it could have been, but it was a big learning curve.
Especially that CFO one. I think as an actuary in like a reporting role, you're always like, okay, an actuary being a CFO, especially in an insurance company, feels like it does make sense. But like you're saying, it's actually kind of a transition because you come from this very technical, every day talking to people who think like you know what you're talking about to something completely different. Yeah. But ultimately understanding the other drivers of the P&L movements that are not just the reserving and the reserving related components.
Exactly.
How did you find that different view, and how do you think that sets you up for the next part of your career?
Yeah. So I really love being a CFO. So if you were to ask me what is my sort of ideal C-suite type of job, it is the CFO job. And the reason why I like it is because I think it's this sort of how a business makes money is such a fascinating problem. Because the way a business makes money is it's obviously about how you make money, but it's about how you get all of these people in this organization to pull together to make sensible decisions in small ways, which overall contribute to making money. And then there's the big picture side of it as well, which is to say, okay, you can get all of those people to make sensible decisions, but are you actually, are the sensible decisions aimed at the right stuff? Is the strategic direction of the organization right? So I find that all very interesting, and it's a complex problem, which is fascinating. But then the other side of being a CFO is you kind of the 2IC to the CEO. And I really enjoy that kind of a role. I like having somebody there who has the vision and has to do the standing up in front of the audience. And I like being their right-hand person. And so I found that really enjoyable. So it was a role that suited my personality really well. And I found fascinating. The things I found challenging were the leadership side. My boss at that time used to joke, him and I had a standing joke that I took the job not knowing what the salary was, and he hired me not knowing how old I was. And the reality, I was very young. So when I joined that exco, I was 27. Oh, wow. And I found the people side of the job a big step up. EQ is something that develops with time. Emotional maturity develops with time, experience, dealing with different types of people. And I was, out of my depth on the people side. And then the other thing that I found tough was the strategic side. We all love to think that we are strategic thinkers and we should be in strategy. But when it actually comes down to making these big decisions and having a big vision for where an organization's going, it's very hard to know what to do. And so those two things were a big learning curve for me.
And how would you say, what are the things that helped you actually get the success? You come into this really young. I mean, you always see the stats around, how many women actually qualified actuaries. At this point, it's not even great. So I can just imagine back then what it could have been like. And I mean, how did you navigate that? Did you ever feel like I'm here because someone just wanted to give a woman an opportunity? And did you ever feel like maybe it was too rushed and it was maybe too much of a jump too soon?
Yeah.
And how did you then eventually find your feet?
Yeah. So I must say, early on in my career, I don't know if I was naive or blind to it, but being a woman was never something that felt like a big deal. And I suspect it was partly because of the people I worked with. So I was very fortunate to work with people who were very, who never got even the slightest hint that they had any bias. And they just sort of treated people like people. So I was very lucky with that. And Sanlam has a lot of senior women, or did then, I think they still do, but they had a lot of senior women in senior positions. So it wasn't that weird. I was always much more conscious of my age. So I felt young and I felt inexperienced and I felt out of my depth. I think navigating that, part of it is I suppose just courage. I love Brené Brown, so she talks beautifully about courage, and I won't do it justice. But she talks about this concept of fear and courage not being opposites. They're not opposite things. Courage is about doing a thing even though you're fearful, right? So you're doing it even though you're scared. So part of it was about just doing it, going to the audit committee, presenting. Like, it goes well, it goes badly, you reassess, you try and do better next time. And then part of it was support. So having people around you that support you. And then luckily having the strong actuarial technical grounding does give you some sort of authority in a room that is useful. So, people can't actually pull the wool over your eyes when it comes to the financials of an insurance company. And I had very deep understanding of how we made money. And so I had always that sort of something inside myself that I had confidence in to fall back on. Even if I didn't have confidence in the people side or the politics, I could at least be confident that the numbers were right.
And I think for women, watching this right now who are thinking, okay, this next opportunity is calling me, that maybe a step too big, and they're having those thoughts. You mentioned courage, you mentioned just try and see how it goes. And I think I've kind of had a very similar career and very similar kind of thought to go, let's just try. Worst case, we just move on.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think, what pieces of advice would you give? Because I think what we found, and there's a lot of research around how as women we tend to be more critical of ourselves before putting our foot forward or our hands up to actually do something, and feeling like we need to tick every single box rather than just trying.
Yeah, so I think the just trying thing is a really important thing. So, and it's hard to explain to somebody how to do that. But I'll give a practical example. So I am not a big fan of public speaking, and I don't think I'm very good at it. But I have never in my career turned down an opportunity to public speak, because I know intellectually that the only way I'm going to get better at it is if I do it. And so that's sort of something that I've sort of almost set in my mind as an intention for my career that I've stuck with. And I still hate it. But I do it. I said yes to you. So I think there's a lot in this thing about these opportunities always come slightly too soon. That you always feel like you are underprepared. So the question is, can you do it anyway? And then can you have a growth mindset in the way you approach it? And I didn't know this growth mindset terminology when I was younger, but I think I've always had it, which is maybe I can't do it, but I can't do it yet. Maybe I didn't do it very well today, but I can do it better tomorrow. And if you can get that mindset going, where you are always trying to say, well, what can I take out of this experience that will make tomorrow better, rather than the self-critical mindset of I'm not good enough, then you are better placed to take these things on.
I definitely agree. I almost say you almost need to believe in yourself regardless.
Regardless. Yeah. I do it anyway.
Just do it anyway. I guess
Yeah.
Nike was onto something and they said, just do it.
Yeah.
So, you move from CFO, eventually, you go from being the 2IC to being the chief commander.
Yeah.
What motivated taking that up?
So that's an interesting one. So the person that I worked for in the CFO job, he was a big supporter of mine. And he said to me from quite early on that he thinks I could do it. I don't know that I was very ambitious when I was younger. So obviously the idea of it appealed to me. I'm not sure that I really understood why. But I think, there were two things I do remember is I did like the idea of being in a more real world kind of job. Being in finance or actuarial does sometimes feel a little bit like you're reporting after the fact. Like what you're doing is not really having a real world impact. And you don't actually know how the nuts and bolts of the organization work. We pay claims, but you don't actually know how. Some of our actuaries learned during COVID because we had to get them involved in paying claims. But you're losing. You don't have that practical side. So it sort of that appealed to me, and then getting out of the technical work. I think we were chatting a little bit beforehand. I'm an easily bored person. And I'm always looking for variety. So trying to do something that was non-technical appealed. But yeah, a big part of it was having this mentor who believed that I could. And then I suppose how these opportunities always come up, it was a similar kind of situation. There was a restructure. So the business had been split into two. And the distribution part of the business had been split from the back office part of the business, and it wasn't working culturally. It had created a situation where there was too much conflict between the two parts of the business, and we were restructuring, and the opportunity came up as part of that restructure. And so I took it, not knowing at all what I was getting myself in for. And I was well out of my depth. And really for two reasons. The people complexity of that kind of a job is just times 1,000. You cannot compare managing 50 actuarial people with managing 5,000 insurance agents. It's not comparable. And so I was underprepared for that. And then I was not politically savvy enough. So my political intelligence was not where it needed to be for a role like that. So it was a very steep learning curve. If I could go back, would I do it again is a question I always ask myself. And I mean, definitely. Even though it feels like it was 5 years too early, it still is. I wouldn't want to have not had that experience. It was an incredible experience. I worked with wonderful people. We built an amazing business. I really, there were lots of things about it I loved. But it was 5 extremely stressful years. I didn't get a lot of sleep.
And what would you say your key takeaways? What were your key parts of the experience, of leading this organization?
So I think my sort of people understanding about how critical people are to an organization grew immeasurably. My ability to cope with complex people situations, I don't think I was very skillful during those 5 years, but certainly I'm a very different leader and manager after than I was before. I almost feel like it would be nice to almost go back and do it again with what I know now, but I suppose we all feel like that about these kinds of things. And then there was a lot about it that was quite inspirational. So the business is a funeral insurance business, which doesn't always have the best reputation in South Africa. You had we had, I think it was something like 3,500 insurance advisors. But there was such I spent a lot of time traveling around the country. I mean, I remember having to go to Lusikisiki. I didn't even know where Lusikisiki was. and meeting all these amazing people. And we had all these incredible advisors and clients in these rural parts of South Africa. And not always, but a lot of the time you could really see the positive impacts that we were having on their lives, and you could make decisions that would, have a real life impact on clients' lives. And that was incredibly rewarding. I mean, we did a project while I was there where we went from paying claims in 48 hours to paying claims in 4. And to pay a claim a funeral claim in 4 hours is a life-changing thing for a family in need. So it was just that sort of stuff was very meaningful about the role. So yeah, I got a huge amount out of it. Although one of the most important things I got out of it was learning that I'm not naturally a CEO. Okay. And that it was not what I wanted to do forever. So, and that's why I stepped out.
Okay, that's actually quite interesting. So, and it kind of is an interesting move through your life because, you said early on, very ambitious, very willing to always take on the next thing, looking up, trying to take on these adventures. You get to the pinnacle and you're like, actually not quite.
Exactly.
That's actually really interesting, and I think a kind of an interesting thing because you always look up and you're like, yeah, one day is one day. But I think the closer you get, I head up evaluations team. You're like, yeah, okay, this does look actually like really stressful.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I think for a lot of us, so first of all, I think we all define success in general. Well, not everyone, but I think in general, people define success as career success, right? And there's a lot caught up in that. Obviously, the money side, what you tell your parents about what you do. When you meet someone for the first time, it's almost always the first question you ask, what do you do? So a lot of our sense of personal identity is tied up in our career. And I think I always feel like I feel bad saying it because I feel like I'm saying it from having gone through it and being out the other side. But it doesn't need to be. Your whole identity doesn't need to be your career. You can have an identity that's about other stuff. And that was a journey that I had to go on to learn that about myself.
And I guess life is a lifelong journey.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm still ambitious, but I'm ambitious about other things now. I'm ambitious about how many countries I can visit. And, I have ambitions to spend more time with my friends. And, I'm ambitious about different stuff.
And so I think slightly segueing into that, and I think anybody I said I'm interviewing, and it was like, this is a great opportunity to find out about taking a career break, and when we spoke earlier, I actually thought this was the first time. You mentioned actually this is not the first time, so I was like, oh, not career limiting, noted. And I think for me, maybe just even start that first one. Which part of your career was your first career break? What motivated it? What did you learn out of it? And what made you go back into working?
Yeah. So I would say my partner has been a big influence in my life in this regard. So he's also a successful actuary in his own right, 5 years older than me. But he almost weirdly doesn't have this crazy ambition thing. As I say, he's been very successful. So I think he is ambitious. But he's, even from very young, seen that there's more to life than just work. So he actually took a career break very early on in his career. He did a year of traveling. And he always wanted to do it again. So he decided, he was about 40 or so, that he wanted to take a year off. And then he didn't want to go back to working full time. And so what I did, it's a bit of a complicated story, but Sanlam allowed me to take 4 months off to travel with him, which I did. But the problem with that is it wasn't enough. And so I made the decision to leave Sanlam. And so at that point, then I thought, well, now why not? He was still on his career break. So now we were both available. So we decided we're going to spend a year traveling. So it wasn't really, it was almost more his ambition than my ambition. But it was a really wonderful experience, to just have that space where you're not thinking about work. You don't have any responsibilities. You're just doing something that is for you, and it was wonderful. So it was always my plan to do it again.
Okay.
Yeah. And so when I joined the Standard Bank Group, which is where I moved to, so I moved to Liberty after that year off, I said to the person who employed me that I was there for 3 years. And it ended up being more like 10. So I did eventually do it again, but it took me quite a while. And that was really just because I was really enjoying my time there, and my role kept evolving and I kept doing different things and I was enjoying what I was up to. And COVID happened in the middle and all of that, obviously. So yeah, so it was always the plan to do it again. This time is a little bit different though, because I actually want to semi-retire. So I don't want to go back to a full-time corporate job this time. I think last time I was a bit young. I wasn't quite as financially okay to be able to take a long break. But this time I want to make sure that I use it as an opportunity to reset. So yeah, the plan is to travel for about a year on and off, not full time, because my partner's got some work responsibilities. He's luckily got lots of flexibility, but he's got some responsibilities here. And then we'll reassess at the end of the year. And then the idea would be to look for something more part-time. But I don't know what that looks like yet. And who knows, I get bored easily, so I might decide actually I want another corporate job or something might come along. Who knows? But that's the plan.
And I think that's quite amazing. And because I think, and I was saying it earlier, I'm like, especially when you work in this, valuation space, you almost like feel like, and especially, with this career, you chasing either a career title or you're chasing this qualification, and it's always like there's always something, and you're like, okay, when do I get to rest? And I like the fact that you actually did it even at a point in your career and you were able to then come back. And how did it actually happen? Were you just like, was it like you knew when you left for the year that you had a job on the other side, or was it like, I'll see what happens when I come back?
No, it was I'll see what happens when I come back was the strategy, if you can call it that. And what I did do towards the back end of the year is a bit of transition coaching. So I worked with a coach specifically to articulate what sort of role I wanted, and then to get my story straight. So, to make sure that I could sell myself, when I went and tell the right story about why I took the career break and what I was looking for. And so, first to be clear about it for yourself, but then also to be able to explain it. I was nervous about it. My experience was that it wasn't particularly difficult to re-enter the work world. It's hard to say why. I mean, I think we all worry more about these things than we should. I mean, the reality is we are skilled professionals in a sector where there's quite a shortage of skills. So, there are more jobs out there than you think. So it's a little bit of a story you tell yourself that it's difficult. But also people, I think most leaders in organizations either have taken a sabbatical of their own somewhere along the line or would love to. So I don't think it has the stigma that maybe people think it does. My experience when I talk about it has often been more of, I wish I could do it, or you're so lucky, or rather than this is weird or suspicious or something. So, I don't think it's got quite the stigma that we kind of imagine that it does. Look, I'm sure I have come across people who don't understand at all why you would do something like that and think it's a bit weird. But mostly, I think people are, if anything, jealous. And these days, we value a bit more well-rounded actuaries. So, we're not just looking for people who are workaholics anymore. So it's less of an issue than you think.
Oh, that's very true.
Yeah. I mean, that said, it takes it's a sacrifice. So, I mean, it's something people often ask me how we do it. And the reality is because we value traveling so much, we are very careful with how we manage our money. We're quite sensible about things like where we live. We've lived in the same house for 20 years. We don't buy new cars. We've spent a lot of efforts investing in making sure we've got some financial freedom. Obviously helps to have a double actuary household and no kids. Mm-hmm. But of course, that was also a choice that we made. And then you do, it has a financial impacts in other ways as well. So, it is something you are sacrificing to be able to do. And then people often ask me, do we travel business class? We do not. We fly economy. So we don't do youth hostel dorm rooms, but we do youth hostel private rooms. We camp. You can't live the 5-star lifestyle if you want to do it for a whole year.
Okay, that's quite interesting. And I mean, how have you found that? Because I guess when I even said I'm interviewing Anne, a lot of people are like, listen, your travel escapades are like well known. Like you said, everyone's jealous. Everyone loves it. Everyone was like, wait, everyone knows that apparently Anne has like a month where she takes off and she's offsetting, globetrotting around this world. And I think maybe just a little bit of a glimpse into, I guess, on this next year, you've done this for so many years. Which parts of the globe are still there?
No, so many places, so many places. So this year we're trying to do a bit more slow travel. So and on our last one, we did crazy stuff, like we went to Vanuatu and we slept in a village on a active volcano, and we did crazy stuff like that. This time we're trying to do a little bit more, go to a place and spend time and, be a little bit less type A about it. So, we've just spent 2 months in Europe, lots of skiing mostly. And then we're off on a long camping trip through Mozambique and Zimbabwe. So that'll be lots of nature and all of that. And then we're going to spend a few months mostly in Indonesia, sort of enjoying the kind of island life in Indonesia. And then we're going to go to Brazil in September, hopefully to try and see the jaguars in the wild. So that will be a bit more of a
back to the normal,
back to a bit more of an extreme kind of trip. But that's the plan. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sitting here very, very jealous because how you have a travel bug and it was informed by a partner, but I'm like, I just have it in general.
Yeah.
And I would love to spend a year just traveling around the world. But I think, like you mentioned, it takes that financial sacrifice and actually putting aside the money to be able to make it happen and to be able to take a career break.
Yeah.
Because, we were walking away from quite a healthy salary as an
Exactly.
actuary to be able to go, okay, I'm just going to travel and let's see how it goes.
Yeah. And I mean, look, it's a cliche, but our logic is a little bit, you can wait till you're 65 and you're retired, but you might not be healthy enough then. You might not be alive then. The jaguars might be extinct then. So,
And then my leaves might be underwater by then.
Yeah, well, exactly. So, we'd rather make the sacrifice now and do the things we love. Yeah.
And do you feel like being an actuary has been able to open that financial freedom that actually has allowed you to be able to live this life?
Yeah, so I do think we are incredibly fortunate. Anybody who ended up in the actuarial field, and then obviously the double actuary income is helpful. But I mean, it's a career where you can be financially secure reasonably easily. And so, I mean, what a wonderful privilege. And so, use the privilege for something.
No, definitely. And I think, so, you've come here, you've answered the call to help out from a woman's perspective. And like I mentioned earlier in the first part of it, you are 2025 Inkanyezi Award winner, and that's voted for. So it isn't like we put names in a hat and yours just came out. So we just put, people actually voted and said, it's time that you get your flowers while you're still alive. And I think, and for me, like I said, when the voting commenced and you won, and now for me, in the time I've been in the AWC, and that's almost 10 years, it was like a no-brainer. And I was completely honored to be able to give you that award. But, you know, like I said, it's voted for. So that means you've actually made real impact, real tangible change in women's lives who actually are like, you know, for me, it's a no-brainer that it's Anne. And I think for me, I wanted to get into that to say, you know, you've helped a lot of women. And do you think it comes from the career that you've kind of had? And what are some of the challenges you feel like you've faced that you are ready to send the ladder down and continue to help women? Because you've done an amazing job thus far.
Thank you. So it's interesting. I mentioned earlier that early on in my career, I was not that conscious of the femaleness and the impact it was having on my life. As I got later in my career, I became more conscious of it. And I think there were kind of two reasons. So I do think I sort of moved into organizations where I noticed more issues around gender equality. And got more exposed to this sort of thing, but also I started to feel a sense of responsibility in terms of how can I've now been successful. How can I make sure that I'm paying that success forward? And then I've always naturally gravitated towards being a teacher. So I actually really like teaching. I enjoy helping somebody. I love seeing like the light go on when somebody suddenly gets something and something makes sense to them. And then I also selfishly, there's a lot of value in, they call reverse mentorship, but there's a lot of value in having a deep network in an organization, in an industry. And people think, well, network always means like upwards. But actually, there's a huge amount of value in having friends and colleagues and mentees and stuff at all sorts of levels in an organization. So I also get a lot of like personal value, not career and satisfaction from just, you know, being more involved in these kinds of things. And then, I already mentioned, you know, talking in public and all of those kinds of things are good experiences. So, yeah, so I suppose I've done more of it as I've gotten older. And I really enjoy it. Some of the things that I think I see women battle with, so my current bugbear, or the thing I'm on about at the moment, you'll know because I've changed my topic for the leadership development program this year, is corporate politics and political intelligence. I see a lot of women really battle with politics. They almost shy away from it. They think it's something dirty that they shouldn't get involved in. And in my career, I feel like I would have loved to have been more politically savvy earlier. And I think I underestimated the importance of it. So I think that's something that more senior women can really help more junior women with how to navigate. And then things like imposter syndrome. You know, I see that a lot. And it's not just imposter syndrome, it's also this sort of like self-limiting assumption thing. Like I assume that I won't be able to do it, or I assume that I won't be good at it. And I went through that a bit earlier in my career. I thought I was not good at people stuff. And then when I joined the Standard Bank Group, I sort of reinvented myself as being someone who is good at people stuff. And it was fine. So, you know, I think that self-limiting assumptions is almost more of an issue than imposter syndrome, because I think everyone battles with imposter syndrome, but if you're letting it limit you, that's a problem. So it's something I'm interested in. Look, I do mentor men as well, so I'm not there's a bias towards women. And then I actually genuinely enjoy, so if somebody asks me to teach a topic or do a little seminar or something, I always say yes, because I genuinely enjoy it.
So maybe the next step is lecturer, but I don't know if it has the flexibility that you're looking for.
Yeah, lecturing involves a lot of marking, so I'm not sure I'm up for that.
But I think that teaching spirit has really come through in the mentorship you've provided to women and men across the industry. And I think what I'm also interested to find out, Anne, is you've obviously had a long career. Wow, how has the actuarial profession kind of shape shifted through the years as you've kind of gone through your career?
Yeah. So that's a really interesting question. It's so much bigger now than it was when when I started, I don't know the numbers. I did at some stage, but there were very few actuaries in the country to start with. And then the number of sort of female and black actuaries was almost zero. I mean, it was a very, very small profession, very technical. So most actuaries were doing very technical work. And there were obviously there were, the Adrian Gores of the world, people doing amazing things. South Africa's always been very innovative, and we've always had actuaries involved in these really innovative things in business. But most actuaries were working in very technical fields and quite back officey, like your traditional, stereotypical actuary. And what you see these days is just so much more diversity in our membership base, in the people who are qualified, actuaries working in much wider fields, actuaries working in management and product development and marketing and IT. And it's just, we've branched out. And I think that sort of stereotypical nerdy back office actually, they still exist, and some of them are my best friends. but there's so much more. There's so much more in the profession than there used to be. So many different personality types and different skill sets. So it's been fun to be part of.
So that is, because I think even for me, even the extra exams that come through and things that people, and you're like, oh, if I had to go back and write that exam, I don't know how it would go. Because it is constantly evolving and changing. And I guess you also, volunteer time towards the profession. You were speaking earlier about the sessional that you were a part of in terms of the code of conduct. And where do you feel like the profession is going as we're widening our scope, as we're getting involved in different industries, doing different types of work from what we used to do? Where do you think we're going?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I kind of feel like the Actuarial Society in South Africa, the profession has kind of come of age in the last few years. I mean, when I wrote the exams, we wrote them exclusively through the UK. And even getting a FASA was quite a new thing, like that you got a certificate from ASA was something that most actuaries just had an FFA in those days. And the Actuarial Society of South Africa was kind of a nice club to belong to rather than, something core. I mean, now the Actuarial Society is it's still small, actually, if you go to the offices, and we're quite a small profession. They do a lot with a small number of permanent staff. But we run our own exams, we have our own identity, we're starting to have put a push into contributing to in public policy debates. Lusani was a big driver of that. So I think we've kind of come of age as a profession in South Africa, and I hope that will continue to grow from strength to strength, particularly on that public interest side. It's not somewhere I do a lot of work, but I think actuaries should be involved in how we're making our country better. So I think there's a lot there. And then just increasing the sort of scope of the profession and the kinds of things that we're involved in. I'm excited about it. So, yeah.
I think so too. And I think you mentioned earlier around, when you had the project where you were turning around claims payment time down to at least within 4 hours. And I think we'll almost, especially with this younger generation, always wondering, they calculate this reserve number and what does it really mean in the bigger scheme of things. But like you're saying, it actually does mean at the end of the day, the company is in a position to be able to pay out someone when that life event or disability event or short-term event does eventually come about. So I think, yes, I think finding our purpose within wider society, I think, is becoming something more key as part of the society and the actuarial profession going forward. And I think for me, maybe another thing is, we spoke about this career that spanned different kinds of companies, different roles. Which part was your favorite part?
Oh. That's an impossible question. Wow, which is my favorite part? No, I can't say that I have a favorite part.
Just in case you want to go back.
I think the thing that brings me the most value when I think back on things there's two things. So the one is the people that I've worked with. So I've worked with incredible people, mostly. I mean, you also learn things from the less incredible people that you work with. So I've had some tough things that have happened. But there's so many incredible people that I've worked with and so many relationships that I've made over the years. And so most of my favorite moments of my career are things that are, where I'm thinking about the people, going to battle with people who you will die with to get something done, and those friendships and relationships and things that you've learned from people over the years. So I can think of lots of examples, but I'm not going to name anyone, but that's the one side of it. And then the other side of it is just the variety. I've been very privileged in that I've been involved in so many different types of businesses and different types of roles. And, I've done everything from, profit coding to running an IT development team to, managing the big Standard Bank buyouts of Liberty. I was very involved in that project. So I've done all sorts of things. So the variety for me is the other thing that's been such a privilege. It's almost like one thing isn't my favorite. It's the fact that I got to experience all these different things.
And what do you think it is about you? So there's elements of luck, opportunity finding you when it needs to be, but people want to invest in you clearly. A career like this doesn't just come out of the blue. Yeah. And what do you think it is about you that people have seen, wanted to invest in? Has anyone who actually ever sponsored you told you and said, Anne, I saw this?
Wow. You're saving all these difficult questions for the end. So, I hate it when people sit and say, this is my secret to success, because I always think, how do you know? How do you know it's not just survivorship bias or a story that you've told yourself that is actually not true and it was something completely different? But I do think, I always joke that one day I'm going to start a consulting firm and all we're going to be is a bunch of people who are competent. And it's such a boring word, competence. But I do think for me, a lot of the things I've done in my career have been about being competent. If you're going to do something, you do it properly. If you don't know how to do it properly, you figure out how to do it properly. You ask for the help, you get the skills, you put the effort in. If you are out of your depth and you're not doing something competently, you've got to find a way to deal with that. So I do think I'm somebody who takes my responsibilities seriously, and people see that, and they see that you can give me something and I will take care of it properly. I won't be casual with it. I will get it done properly. So I think that's the one side of it. And then the other side of it is, I think I already said that I've always had this feeling that I'm not good at people. And so I've always put a lot of effort into relationships and the people side. And not because I think I'm good at it, but because I want to be better at it. So I feel like I need to put effort in. And I do think that's also served me in good stead, particularly because actuaries have got this bit of a reputation of not being people. If you can build a bit of a reputation of being a people actuary, it's a little bit of not unique, but a bit of a more of a unique selling proposition than being a technical actuary. So I think that has worked well for me. And then a lot of luck, and then a very supportive partner. So I feel like the fact that I have had someone at home who's taking care of the house so that I've got the opportunity to invest heavily in my career has been very helpful. Yeah.
And how have you found, so it's two actuaries clearly who are amazing in their own different rights. How have you found, and I guess we had an AWC event the other day and someone was like, there needs to be a masterclass on dating and actuary in terms of supporting exams and how do you be supportive of exam periods and what are you not aware of that, the person is going through during exam cycles. But you didn't experience that because both of you understand each other and each other's struggles, but taken different career paths and you've been allowed to flourish and have this great and big career and continue to excel. Whereas your partner, as you said, from relatively early on in his career, made the decision to kind of take a step back and enjoy life more. And now you're finding yourselves together back in the place of commonality in that regard of there's more to life than a career. How, I guess, your partner's been really supportive, and how have you navigated that? So, everyone always says the two actuaries, no kids household must be flowing in money. And you obviously enjoy all the trips, and not having kids definitely helps a lot. And do you think that there's been an element of that helping in your career in terms of being able to propel you forward?
Yeah. So I mean, look, I definitely think I made the decision not to have children quite early on. I do think I know lots of very, very successful moms, and I think that it doesn't need to be a reason to hold back your career, but it is a whole extra piece of mental load and another thing that you are dealing with in your life. And I have huge respect for women who can get both things right. I found my career very stressful, and only having to deal with the career side of it, I can't even imagine how much more difficult it must be if you've also got all the weight of responsibility of raising kids. So I have huge amounts of respect, and I do think it has been easier for me from that point of view. On the partnership side, I suppose I know how privileged we are to be two actuaries, and that two successful actuaries is a privilege. But it's not really about that. It's about having a genuine partnership. So it's about having somebody in your life that is supportive of you sort of unconditionally, but also can challenge you when you need to be challenged. So if they see you going off the rails, they can sit you down and go, no, you're way too stressed. This is not healthy. We need to do something about it. And so that genuine partnership thing, I think, is what you get the value out of. It's not the money or the being able to talk about reserving over dinner. It's about genuinely having a spirit of partnership. You're approaching life as a team.
Yeah. So I don't know if Twitter algorithm is realizing I'm maybe at that stage of my life, but you're always seeing these tweets about the partner is the most important choice in your life, because I guess a bad job you can easily walk away from, and yes, you can also walk away from a bad partner, but that is quite a key role in terms of the support, like you're saying, especially if you're an ambitious woman who has some big dreams. You need a man who understands that and is willing to support you.
And it doesn't need to be a romantic partner, right? So, I'm fortunate in that I met somebody young, but, I know lots of successful people who've got other people in their lives that are playing that role. So, but you've got to figure out who those people are. Who are those people in your life that are a
sense of community,
who you are going to war with? They are on your team no matter what. And make sure that you've got that support.
And I think that's been a common theme. You said even in your career, so in your life, you had the support from your partner, but as well as in your career, you've had the support. And that support is translated to you being able to support us, support other women in the profession. And I think I want to take the opportunity to thank you, one, for coming to join me on the sisterhood couch today. And I think we've touched on a lot of topics, and you've had an absolutely amazing career, and the fact that you're world famous for your travels lets you know that while you had a successful career, people really love and respect the balance that you've brought into your life, and clearly are all very jealous of it. But I think the mentorship that you've given to the AWC, I am forever grateful for. I think thank you for being my very first guest. Anytime I message you and you always say yes, okay, fine. And I guess I like how you said it's actually something you actively do as part of even personal growth, in the sense that challenge yourself to do something even if you've never done it before, or do it again and you can only get better even if it isn't the world's most comfortable thing to do. So I think for me, I am completely honored. I am so grateful for the fact that you joined us today, and completely inspired to take this career break. As I told you out there, reached out to other women and people are semi-retired. And I said, you have to come on this podcast and tell us how, because I desperately want to know. But Anne, I mean, do you want to give any parting last words to the audience? You know, when they watch this back, any words of inspiration for the girl sitting there, maybe the little girl who thinks she wants to be an actuary, the young woman who's studying in varsity, the olderish woman who's fighting through this career, the almost middle-aged woman who is at a crossroads in her career, and the woman who says, okay, maybe it is time to take a break. What are your pearls of wisdom?
So, all the difficult questions at the end. If I was going to say one piece of advice, it would be that you have to do you. You know, there's so much expectations on us about what success looks like, what you should want to do, you know, that you should want to be a CEO, you should want to make it in your career, you should want to get married, you should want to have children, you know, you should want to take a career break, whatever these things. There's so many expectations on us that come from the outside. But actually what you need to do is you need to find a way of figuring out what matters to you. Like, what does success look like for you? What is important to you? And then be your own person. And it's going to change as you get older. What is important to me now is not what was important to me 10 years ago. Figure out what's important to you right now and go for it.
I think that's great words of advice. And I think, like I said, I'm that almost middle-aged one. So it's an interesting dynamic of, okay, like you're saying, do you have the kids? Do you want to be a CEO? Do you want to be a CFO? You know, the closer and closer you get, you're like, okay, you know, let's assess this. But you know, like you said, you had this ambition, and that's supposed to be the ultimate goal. And you're like, oh, is there another way? But I think thank you for a very honest, open conversation. I've absolutely loved talking to you, and I've stalked you, so I thought I knew you. But this has been very informative, very interesting, and I think thank you for being the first guest. I highly appreciate it. I think I've learned a lot. I think the women who watch this will learn a lot, as well as the men that get to watch it. And I think for me, my name is Lufuna Nechitenje. Welcome to the AWC podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Our very first guest was Anne Livingstone. I am eternally grateful, as I said. And yeah, please keep your eyes and ears open. The Women CEO series continues, but the series will continue to evolve as we shoot throughout the rest of the year and as we take this forward. I'm your host for the day, and thank you.
Thank you so much.